Our next witness is Connor Healy.
The next witness is an expert witness, is a government director at IPVM, an independent US-based research and media organization focused on surveillance technologies and businesses. And this organization has dedicated significant resources to covering China as the world's largest market for surveillance and the home of the industry's most prominent companies. In his report to the Tribunal entitled Uyghur Surveillance and Ethnicity Detection, Analytics in China, the witness covers the technical capabilities of surveillance networks in Xinjiang, including Uyghur face detection and its application, as well as which corporate and government entities are involved in developing these technologies. Mr. Healy, the Tribunal has received and read your report. They have done so in detail, so I'll invite you now to make a short presentation, but in the interest of time, please do not let it go over 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do my best to keep the time, and thank you for having me. I want to offer some context for my testimony just at the outset. Since our founding as an organization, IPVM's mission has been to hold surveillance manufacturers, sellers, and users accountable, and we publish stories on unethical activities in everywhere from Colombia to California. But the People's Republic of China's use of unethical surveillance against Uyghurs has been utterly unequaled and deeply troubling to us as analysts of this technology. Since 2018, we've published dozens of reports on these issues that, taken together, show China and its companies have designed, implemented, and even patented advanced surveillance designed specifically to target Uyghur Muslims. And in my testimony today, I'll speak about two issues also addressed in my expert report. Certain government mass surveillance projects within Xinjiang executed by two of China's most prominent technology companies.
Little slip,
Oh,
perhaps.
sorry. I'm trying to keep to the 10 minutes.
I know it's a bit unfair, isn't it? We ask you to be short and then we tell you to slow down, but if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I'll try to slow down. And then second, the surveillance analytics behind these mass surveillance systems that have been designed to identify ethnic Uyghurs on the basis of their facial features. Is this how I... Okay, so this is Hikvision. It's the world's largest video surveillance manufacturer, roughly 40,000 employees, 2020 revenue of $10 billion. It operates globally, just in the UK. It has about a 40% market share. It originated from the China Electronics Technology Group Corporation, a PRC state-owned entity, created to supply electronics to the People's Liberation Army, and Hikvision continues to be state-owned, according to their own financial filings. They've established a significant presence in Xinjiang since being awarded multiple public security projects in 2017 for surveillance installations. Many of these include both the installation and operation of mosque surveillance and supplying surveillance cameras to Xinjiang's re-education camps. So I'll briefly explore two of these in greater detail. In Pishan County, Xinjiang, Hikvision received a contract for a security protection and prevention control system. It included camera installations at mosques and education through transformation centers, a term I understand refers to the infamous Uyghur re-education camps. Another contract was in Xinjiang's Moyu County for a social defense system. It included surveillance cameras for both re-education centers and mosques. Specifically, it specified that facial recognition cameras would be placed at the entrance of each of the 967 mosques in Moyu County. So face recognition systems such as those installed in Moyu and Pishan County would allow authorities to catalog the identities of those attending mosques and could proactively monitor attendance and the identities of the people attending in real time. Hikvision has falsely claimed it has no knowledge or control over how its technology is used in the region. It's important to note that these projects go beyond simply selling the government cameras. They're private-public partnerships, meaning Hikvision not only constructs but also operates the installations for several years, as shown in both tenders and Hikvision's own financial filings. The Pishan County project, for example, it includes direct operation through 2040, while the Moyu County project runs through 2035. Turning now to Dahua, which is the world's second largest surveillance manufacturer. I think I just need some water. My mouth is getting dry.
And a little bit fast still, so...
Okay, I'll try to
because
slow down.
Although we've read it, the people watching and the people here in the hall have not.
So, Dahua's operations span more than 180 countries. They're comparable to Hikvision, but the company's origins and ownerships are private. However, their contracts in Xinjiang total almost $1 billion US. Again, I'll briefly explore two of these. Among these is a $686 million US surveillance project in Yarkent County. Dahua was contracted to build and operate for a period of 9 years, a mass surveillance network, and construct convenience police stations. It's notable for its massive size. If you do the math, that's nearly a $807 US expense for each of the county's 850,000 residents. And I should say a contract of this size is virtually unheard of in the surveillance industry globally. There are no countries that have contracts for public projects of this size. A second one in Kiamo County, worth $61 million, included a system that, quote, captures the feature of wireless MAC addresses, also known as Wi-Fi sniffers. According to reports by Human Rights Watch, these devices form part of the Integrated Joint Operations Platform, or IJOP, and are used in combination with surveillance to identify users of network devices. So, China's mass surveillance systems, such as those that have been installed in Xinjiang, but across the country, made significant use of advanced analytic technologies to automate the collection and processing of data on citizens' whereabouts, activities, associations, characteristics, and more. And most notably, their ethnic characteristics. Here you see an ethnic minority detection feature that was inadvertently demonstrated by Hikvision at a 2018 conference. The company was later discovered marketing a video surveillance project specifically described as being able to detect Uyghurs, and such systems are trained to assess if a person in an image or video is Uyghur on the basis of their facial features alone. And that requires a significant amount of machine learning training and effort. They're known to have been applied in many ways. Here you see a technical document from Heart of City, a smart city software designed by Dahua that offers smart police operations management. This means if a Dahua surveillance camera sees what it believes to be a Uyghur, Heart of City's functionality allows a report to be automatically sent to the police, a real-time Uyghur warning. The document also mentions various subcategories of individuals, including, quote, Uyghurs with hidden terrorist inclinations, unquote, as well as beard detection. I should note this was not a single or incidental mention of real-time Uyghur warnings. The term appeared 14 separate times in this document, as well as in other Dahua documents describing Heart of City's functionality. It's not exclusively used in surveillance. Uyghur face detection was deployed by Alibaba in their Cloud Shield online content moderation solution. Here you see a screenshot from their own documentation showing the solution's capability to detect whether or not a person detected in an image or video posted online is a Uyghur. And that could then automatically flag the content for removal. Another iteration was discovered in a confidential Huawei report regarding an interoperability test with Megvii, one of China's largest face recognition developers. It showed the two companies worked together to test and validate a, quote, Uyghur alarm, unquote, featuring a face recognition-based Uyghur detection product. Huawei also patented this technology. In a July 2018 patent application, Huawei described a face recognition system capable of using surveillance to identify the race of pedestrians and returning two possible results, Han or Uyghur. The patent application was submitted jointly with the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the PRC's government's top research arm. Numerous other prominent Chinese technology companies have filed for similar Uyghur detection patents, including Megvii, SenseTime, IntelliFusion, and Sensing Tech, while Baidu and Alibaba have filed for patents for ethnicity detection without mentioning the specific ethnicity. Others are known to have developed but not patented Uyghur detection, including Uniview, which you see up there, China's third largest surveillance manufacturer, and Tiandi, another large surveillance manufacturer, and also Kingsoft, the logo is not up there. They're a cloud services company. Many of these companies have deflected these findings. Huawei, for example, said their Uyghur alarms were just a test with no intended real-world application. Irrespective of the validity of that statement, it should be noted that building ethnicity detection would require significant effort and investment. For a Uyghur face detection system, manually curated data sets containing thousands of Uyghur faces would be necessary, and this would likely involve thousands of hours of work. The proliferation of these technologies can be said to be an outcome of state policy. In China, detailed standards are issued across all sectors of government, including in surveillance, which specify how bidders would win government tenders. In December 2017, we uncovered this draft document, which was a standard for face recognition systems. And it specifically included ethnicity detection, and in brackets it said Uyghur/non-Uyghur. That standard was never officially published. However, several similar national and provincial standards published since have requested face recognition system to detect individuals' ethnicity or skin color, as you can see in the example here, but do not specify which ethnicity should be detected. Some also mandate beard detection, as you can see there. This is from a national standard that was published. In these standards, ethnicity is thought to be shorthand for Uyghur. This is reinforced by the fact that Chinese authorities have explicitly requested Uyghur face detection capabilities in tenders for numerous public security camera networks. Here you see a map of regions that have issued tenders explicitly requesting Uyghur face detection from an analysis we did in November 2019. Since then, we've discovered several other examples requesting Uyghur face detection that are more recent. This next slide is taken from a recent BBC Panorama documentary, and it shows the testing of a face recognition product by an unnamed private Chinese company on what are, by all appearances, Uyghur detainees. I've included it to demonstrate two final points. First, it should be noted that for developers to validate the performance of face recognition products, Uyghurs are likely required to be used as test subjects. Second, that camera-based analytics are being used to conduct continually more advanced analyses for public security officials. This system shown here is, in fact, an emotional detection system rather than a Uyghur face detection system, and it's intended to analyze a subject's emotional state. Zooming in on this pie chart, for example, red demonstrates negative emotional states measured by the camera. We do doubt that such a product actually performs very well. We can nonetheless continue to expect face recognition-based systems to play a key role in China's policies towards Uyghurs. And with that, hopefully I haven't gone over my 10 minutes, and I would love to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Indeed, you've kept well to time, and I thank you for that. And I do have a few questions, and then I'll pass you on to the panel, please. But to begin with, my first question relates, in fact, to this Uyghur face detection technology that you have spoken about. You did mention that to develop such a technology, you need specific processes, distinct processes, and also quite significant investment. This is not just a natural extension of general detection technology.
Yeah.
So, two questions. You did mention some standards or official documentation specifically requiring a focus on Uyghur detection. If you could speak a little about that. And then related, given that this, therefore, technology had to be purpose-built, what, in your view, is the purpose of this?
Yeah. Video analytics technologies are often sort of grouped in with face recognition when we talk about them, and that's also the case in China's China's national specifications for these technologies. They are in fact distinct from face recognition in terms of the technology and the development process. You can't just build a face recognition system and then, as an add-on, you develop the ability to detect an ethnicity, or for that matter, gender, age, etc., which are other things that these systems have been trained to detect. So it is a process that will require a significant amount of development work. Unfortunately, we don't know all that much about exactly what the development process behind any of these examples in China is. We can only sort of speak generally to what we would expect from such a development process. Having said that, you know, there is, I did mention this in my expert report, I believe, there is some evidence that individuals are being hired in Urumqi to process images manually. You know, we don't know exactly of what, but that's exactly the kind of work you would expect in building this technology. You would have people sort of manually going through images, you know, maybe drawing boxes around faces, setting up a database so that a machine learning process can then learn from that database so that it's accurate. As for what the purpose of this technology is, you know, I can again only really speculate here, because China, the state has not explained what the purpose of this technology is. But if you look at real-time Uyghur warnings by Dahua, for example, so that's a smart policing solution, and it would appear that what they're specifically trying to detect are Uyghurs that are not supposed to be in the particular locale that they're in. In other words, a sort of unexpected Uyghur. In other cases, the technology seems to be a sort of preventative measure, if you will. I can only describe it as a bigoted preventative measure, but to give a simple example, there are various surveillance analytics that you can use to detect intruders as they enter a building, and you know, that's relatively common, or detect people who are engaging in suspicious activity. So these things tend to sort of be grouped in with the technologies you get when as a state, you buy a surveillance system now. And so Uyghur detection, I think, was considered a useful functionality in the same context that, you know, intruder detection might be.
Thanks for that. And
yeah.
Just to take a step back, though, in terms of which governmental departments or parts of the state would have, for instance, issued standards requesting specifically Uyghur detection or minority ethnicity detection. Do we have any information about that?
Yeah, it's a variety of different entities within China. The Ministry of Public Security nationally issues the standards for surveillance projects, and they have issued a national standard which asks for ethnicity detection. There are also various provincial standards. There's one in Xinjiang, for example. Those are generally where those standards are issued from. It's also a variety of sort of more local public security bureaus that are requesting the technology, specifically Uyghur detection, not just ethnicity detection, in tenders for projects in their regions.
Thank you for that. And just to understand how the technology works, so especially the Uyghur face recognition and including the real-time Uyghur warnings that you mentioned that send reports to police when the system detects an Uyghur of concern, for instance. So the system is able to discriminate between, for example, Han Chinese and Uyghurs, and is able to hone in and single out Uyghurs just because, you know, they are essentially Uyghurs, they belong to the Uyghur group. And it further has the ability to then send real-time Uyghur warnings to police if there is anything of concern. And as you mentioned, it could be a matter of simply an Uyghur being in an area that they are not expected by the system to be in, right?
Yeah, and you know, Heart of City, the technology with real-time Uyghur warnings, like I said, it's a smart city management solution. So what it implies is that the police in a given area where this software is used, you know, they would have an operations center where they're managing all sorts of different incident reports that come to them through their surveillance software. And it implies that one of the sort of incident reports that they would then be processing and have people sort of looking through and addressing would be when a Uyghur is detected on a street. And they would then sort of evaluate whether or not that's something they need to do something about. So yeah, if you're Uyghur and walking down the street and you get captured by a camera, it's not unreasonable to expect that seconds later there is a police official evaluating whether or not you're doing anything that requires intervention.
Thank you. I just have two brief questions, and I'll pass it to the panel. But the first is, yesterday, the term, for example, an open-air prison was used to describe an area in Xinjiang because of this high-tech surveillance. And so what do you make of that description?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the description?
So in view of this intrusive surveillance and this focused singling out Uyghurs, the term an open-air prison was used.
To describe the province?
To describe that province. What would you make of that description?
You know, IPVM has evaluated a lot of surveillance products in many regions, you know, many of which are sold to governments and to prison systems. There is no system available to most of the world except China that is as advanced and intrusive as what is being deployed in Xinjiang. And for that reason, I would agree. I don't think there are any prisons in the UK or in the US, for example, that have surveillance systems that are as extensive and advanced.
My thanks for that. Final question is, and where do we go from here? And how likely is it that this technology is not just for surveillance or monitoring or control, but will be taken even further? In your report, you refer, for instance, to the Tiandi Law Enforcement and Case Handling Management Center,
Yeah.
which includes a smart interrogation tiger chair, essentially.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little to us about what that could be, and where is this technology, where could this technology go with respect to, you know, focusing on an ethnic minority?
Yeah. Well, I didn't include that in my initial testimony simply for the reason that there was no evidence that product was developed specifically to evaluate Uyghurs. Having said that, you know, these advanced technologies, I mean, I think you can expect them to be used in the context of detention, which, as I understand it, is happening en masse in Xinjiang. And so I would imagine that such technologies will be used. It's hard to say exactly what we'll expect over the next several years. The thing about these increasingly advanced data analysis technologies is that they have capabilities, or could have capabilities, that are kind of hard for us to even conceptualize. They're advancing very quickly. But you know, this is even now an unprecedented ability to analyze the population and identify people's characteristics in this way. I think it will continue to surprise us.
Thank you. I'll pass you over to the panel. Thank you.
Mr. Zamibora, the witnesses referred to the tiger chair. We've heard a lot of reference to it, and those of us reading the papers have seen drawings of it. But I don't know if Mr. Healy is in a position to throw up on the screen an image of one, because there's a photograph of an actual tiger chair.
Yeah.
Is it available on your screen show? Probably not.
It's not in my presentation. It is in my report. So if there's someone sort of busy in the background working who's able to grab it.
I just think it would be interesting for it to be explained to the people generally. Professor Kaur.
Thank you for your statement. Can you give us a sense of when this ethnicity detection intensified in Xinjiang?
Well, I've personally seen patent applications, for example, that go back as far as 2012. The vast majority of them have been at least patented in 2019 and 2020. Tenders requesting this technology go back as far as 2017 and continue essentially to the present day.
Okay. And you mentioned a draft of the Ministry of Public Security, which you had access to. Are you able to tell us how you had access and how did you then verify that it was the authentic article?
Yeah, so I put up on the screen what you're referring to. It was available online. Most of what I've presented to you is available online, in fact. One of the surprising things about our research is that a lot of this isn't hidden very well. And speaking about methodology, which I didn't address, our methodology is to rely on their own documents, the documents of the Ministry of Public Security or of Chinese companies or of various local public security bureaus. You know, I don't think that this is very interpretive. We are relying rather strictly on what the government itself in China has said it wants and what companies have said they've built.
Okay. Have you got any comment with regards to how accurate this technology is deemed to be? For instance, in the West, we're aware of facial recognition, and there are reports that are coming out from the US and Europe saying that that technology cannot detect the difference between white and black faces, for instance. So in China, have you come across anything to say that, you know, that people believe this is 100% accurate or, you know, perhaps 50% accurate? Is there anything that you've come across in your research?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. So there are government standards that have specified a level of accuracy that they want for this technology. I may have included that in my expert report. If I didn't, I'm happy to follow up with the information. I don't remember the exact number that they specified. It was certainly over 50%. They did, you know, they put this on a 0 to 100 scale, basically. You know, we haven't tested these products, so we don't know how accurate they really are. You know, China has the world's leading face recognition and AI companies, and just about all of them have been involved in developing Uyghur detection. When I say all of them, I mean all of the prominent ones in general.
So
you know,
in your research, are you able to make any connections between detection and something that's actionable afterwards? So you talked about the Uyghur alarms. Can you make any further links between the data, the detection, and anything that happens afterwards? For instance, incrimination or...
in terms of how the alarms are then, so what they then signify when they sort of...
What happens afterwards?
Unfortunately not. Our focus is on the technology, and you know, I think that is an area for future research, if it's possible to determine exactly how this is being used.
You write in your report, ethnicity is thought to be shorthand for Uyghur. How did you come to that conclusion?
A few different ways. So if you look again at the standard up on the screen, what the standard refers to as ethnicity recognition is Uyghur/non-Uyghur. And I think that you know, has more significance than it initially appears to, because there are dozens of ethnicities in China. So that's a pretty specific statement about what the standard interprets ethnicity recognition to be. In addition to that, in terms of the actual implementation, or at the very least the tenders which precede the implementation, it is explicitly stated that what the government wants is Uyghur detection, not ethnicity detection. So that adds that additional context that helps us sort of make a pretty certain claim that ethnicity recognition or detection means Uyghur detection. And then beyond that, there's There's a company called Breezy, Breeesee, I believe. They are, I believe, a subsidiary of Uniview, which I mentioned is the third largest surveillance company in China. And they've said in their own guidance explicitly, ethnicity detection refers to Uyghur detection. They're people who deal with government projects fairly frequently. So.
And the next claim you make is of automated racism. So that follows on from the argument you just made and the evidence you come across. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll come on to the tiger chair in a minute. I want to talk about Huawei first. Everyone knows about Huawei. There's been high-profile cases around the world. They've been accused of this, that, and the other. Huawei always come back and deny those allegations. I'm not aware of them being called racist or racial profiling, but that probably comes in with the fact that they've been accused of colluding with the PRC. So if they are denying those allegations, what have you in your research come across to actually counter that?
Well, when we first reported on Huawei's Uyghur detection, it was the Uyghur alarms functionality you referred to. Huawei said it's just a test. It wasn't meant for real-world applications. It's suspicious on its own. As I've mentioned, it requires a lot of work to build these technologies, so it's at the minimum sort of unusual that they would then just kind of ditch it after a test. And after that denial that the company, does not do this, we then found that they patented it. They had a patent for the technology and were at the same time sort of downplaying this as some kind of fringe activity by the company. A patent, and you talked about collusion with the Chinese government. I don't think that really even has to be a matter of making allegations. It was co-authored with the Chinese Academy of Sciences, so it did occur that they developed this with the Chinese government. Then we can make allegations about what that means and how it was used, but that is factual.
Okay, thank you. So this technology, these various different kinds of technologies, they're not just distributed in Xinjiang nor in China, but also elsewhere where the PRC are engaged in trade. So we've heard about the digital Silk Route. We've heard about such technology being sold very cheaply and even gifted to other countries. Could this be a way of PRC extending not only influence but also control? And second question related to that, is it something that those governments could also be party to and actually enjoy in terms of having such technology in order to control and perhaps even oppress their own populations?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. And when we're talking about that issue, I think we need to speak more broadly than just ethnicity detection. These are systems that provide all sorts of different insights, even without being able to detect race. There have been various reports that China's been exporting these technologies to other countries. China is already the world's largest exporter of sort of conventional surveillance technology. When I think about these technologies, the term techno-authoritarianism, I think, comes up. That is what they conceptually could be used for. I didn't include it in my presentation or expert report, but there's a tender for a mass surveillance system in the city of Nankou that our team has analyzed, dating from March 2020. And that tender describes the ability, it does, by the way, request Uyghur detection, but separately from that, it describes the ability to conduct predictive analytics on the population that could then be used to prevent incidents of social unrest. So in other words, if realized, we're talking about a system that could anticipate protests before they occur. Now, dissidence is always innovative, and often comes up with a way to operate. But I don't know how dissidents could operate under those conditions if their own actions are understood by these technologies sort of better than any human could do, to the extent of predicting whether or not they're engaging behavior that the government disagrees with. It's very scary.
So in your report, you also talk about Alibaba, and that's in terms of video surveillance, which we've heard about. We haven't heard about the internet content moderation. Could you elaborate on this?
Yeah, sure. So, it's well known that China censors its internet extensively. And a big part of how they do that, and for that matter, a big part of how companies like Facebook, deal with content that they just, don't want on their site, is it's automated. They use machine learning trained systems to flag content that should be reviewed and potentially removed. And that's what Alibaba's Cloud Shield solution does. And they thought it was useful to build the detection of Uyghur faces and videos into that solution. From what I understand, there have been reports of Uyghurs having difficulty posting images and videos online. It's the kind of technology that could be behind that.
So in their patents, they actually use the word race and ethnicity, and that the patent is awarded to them afterwards.
Alibaba?
Yeah, with Alibaba.
Yes.
Yeah, and so some of these obviously companies operate globally. In the Euro football tournament, for instance, Alibaba was everywhere. So basically, these companies are quite. You've already used the word unethical. Quite unethical globally as well. Is this the suggestion, or is this am I taking this too far, or?
I think it's very reasonable to say that they've acted in unethical ways globally. Yeah. This gets off the subject of the treatment of Uyghurs somewhat, but if you take the example of Dahua, the South Korean equivalent of the FCC, recently revoked all of their authorizations for their equipment because they had falsified their test results. Hikvision and Dahua have both made hundreds of millions of dollars selling fever detection equipment that doesn't work across the world. We actually published a peer-reviewed study in the Journal of Biomedical Optics to prove this, that they applied an algorithm that essentially adjusted the results so they appeared normal. They were basically faking it. Governments have spent millions of dollars on this stuff. In terms of unethical use of surveillance, I think most of that ends up being the end user. So it might be too far to say that these companies are, going to the UK or the United States and making decisions that then result in unethical use of surveillance. I think government authorities here or in the US or wherever else are the ones making those decisions. But in terms of unethical activities more generally, there are many examples.
So there's many ways we are deeply implicated in terms of, we're not just talking about Xinjiang, we're talking about the entire globe and our position in it. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the Tiger Chair, but you haven't really elaborated on it. So could you perhaps talk about this before I ask you any questions?
Sure. So Tiandi, as I mentioned, it's one of China's largest surveillance manufacturers. They too have developed Uyghur detection. And this is one of their other products. It's a smart interrogation solution. There isn't much that I can say in terms of what analytics might be used in combination with this solution, but there have been reports that if you sort of go back and look at, sorry, I think I unintentionally took that off the screen. I forgot I didn't have my slides. But if you look at the emotion detection solution I showed you, I would consider it likely that in general, technologies, perhaps not specifically emotion detection, but other technologies like that might be integrated into these so-called smart interrogation solutions. And yes, that is a Tiger Chair, which Human Rights Watch has reported that those are used for torture of detainees, that they're left there for hours and hours on end. And that is what comes with this one-stop shop police management system.
Did you get this photo from the internet as well?
Yes.
And, available in China,
Yes.
even though officially they deny the existence of such a chair?
I don't specifically recall if TND denied the existence.
The PRC are denying it?
We didn't get any comment from the PRC. I believe the PRC has denied that they torture detainees in general.
But they accept the fact that they have the chair.
I'm not sure.
And is it only in China that you find this chair? Is it also being distributed globally?
Well, I think it's only in China that TND is selling it, if that's what you're asking. But I think tiger chairs have a longer history, so it would probably be in many places.
Okay. And my final question relates to the reference to the People's Liberation Army and that Hikvision earlier were supplying technology to the PLA. And then this was transferred to the IJOP, the Integrated Joint Operations Platform. Have you come across use of this technology by the PLA in any other way? What I'm trying to understand is how the civil and the military are blurred, how these areas come together.
Right, yeah. I think Hikvision's relationship with the People's Liberation Army is interesting to discuss. We did a collaboration with the Wall Street Journal a few months back in which we published extensive evidence of their, I thought my mic went out. Extensive evidence of their work with the People's Liberation Army. There was a study that one of their employees collaborated with the PLA on with their rocket force to improve the, quote, lethality of their surface-to-air missiles, RPGs, artillery, etc., using Hikvision's technology. They were listed as a Tier 1 supplier of the PLA, which has since been sort of scrubbed. They say they are no longer a Tier 1 supplier, but at one point they were at the highest possible level of suppliers to the People's Liberation Army. Oh, and by the way, about the study, the one improving the lethality of missiles, that was on Hikvision's own China website. That's where we found that study. And the researcher in the study was listed as, a Hikvision researcher. Their response to that was, we had nothing to do with this, and this employee was acting only in his personal capacity. And so the counterpoint, I suppose, is according to Hikvision, their employees are working in their personal capacity when they collaborate with the PLA on missile technology.
Okay, thank you very much.
Before I pass to Professor Lynch, and because people may not be familiar with it, the tiger chair has loops in the bottom for the feet, which we can see, so that the feet are immobilized. What is not quite visible is that there are also restraints, loops or something on the top, so that your wrists are immobilized, your ankles are immobilized, and the torture, if it is torture, is that you're left there for as long as it suits them. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how I understand it.
And we have had some evidence in the materials we've got of tiger chairs where the loops can be tightened electrically. Are you aware of that?
I actually am not specifically aware of that.
Right. Yeah. Professor Lynch, please.
Could you tell us how advanced actual mass facial recognition systems are within Xinjiang as opposed to ethnicity detection?
Well, facial recognition systems in general are a technology that works sort of in most places. There have been some issues in some, in the US, for example, with them not working for every demographic equally. I think that the face recognition systems in Xinjiang work just fine for their explicit purpose, which is to identify people.
So,
yeah.
so what I'm really coming to is they only work if you have a data bank to identify from. And what I was wondering is what proportion of Uyghurs are on those databases compared to Han people living in that region?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think almost everyone in the region would be in those databases. There have been reports that Uyghurs have had their faces profiled, DNA tests taken, have had sort of fingerprints done, that kind of thing, and that's been done sort of for the whole population. I think that in most of China, face recognition would probably be able to recognize most people. I would note, it actually is not the case that you need the database for face recognition to work. You can still capture a face profile. You just wouldn't necessarily have an identity or a name. And you can still get a lot of data on people's movements and that kind of thing. And you could sort of track an unknown suspect or person, for example.
When you say the whole population, do you mean the whole Uyghur population or the whole population of Xinjiang? What were you suggesting?
Certainly the whole population of Uyghurs and Xinjiang. Yeah, I think that the whole population of the province would be correct. I want to clarify that I haven't seen any specific data on exactly how well developed that database is. The data we do have is that China, as a practice, collects the relevant information from citizens that could be used in a face recognition database. So that implies that most people can be identified using face recognition. But I admit some uncertainty as to exactly how extensive their data is.
And one other very quick question. Who are the major funders of IPVM?
So subscribers, basically, like we're sort of like any other media organization. 90% of our revenue comes from subscriptions, and the other 10% comes from courses. Basically, we teach people courses on how to, install surveillance, that kind of thing. We have no big government funders or any dubious financial ties. We certainly are not being funded by the US government, except to the extent that an individual, in the US government might buy a subscription. But
nor Apple nor Microsoft, I take it.
Certainly not.
Thank you.
There may be, whoever buys Apple's surveillance for their sites, maybe they have a subscription, but other than that,
okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's rather horrifying, but also very interesting. Just going back to the Tiger Chair, how do you think this could help torture somebody? I mean, what are the parameters that you might be taking from that big machine that we can see there?
The chair itself or the...
Well, the two are linked, aren't they? So I was just wondering what what might the machine be doing to the chair?
I'm just thinking back to the report. I think we do go into some detail on exactly what the solution offers, and to the best of my recollection, it, to an extent, is case management, and would keep track of perhaps something like how long someone's being interrogated, and if they're using analytics to evaluate something to do with the, say, emotional state of the detainee, that might be a part of it. But I actually wasn't totally expecting to talk about it, so I have to refresh my memory on all the details. There was,
I mean, obviously, these techniques are going to go on and develop. Do you think they'd ever be able to detect your actual DNA?
Using a camera?
Yeah. Can't see how at this stage.
Yeah, I don't see how.
Yeah, because you need the blood. And one last question. How, I mean, this is a bit facetious, but maybe not. How can one use this technology in a good way?
How come? Sorry.
How can you use this technology in a good way? Here at the moment is more trying to pick up the Uyghurs. Is there something that maybe we could use the same technology for in hopefully better circumstances?
I think when it comes to Uyghur face detection, I've spent some time thinking about this, and I cannot come up with a single application of this technology that has a positive outcome for anyone. If someone can, I'm happy to hear it. But there realistically, I think, are no use cases for this technology other than one that targets a particular race. And surveillance is used to monitor people, so it implies that it's for monitoring a race in particular. Yeah, I see nothing positive about that. There are no positive use cases. And to be honest, I think this is a technology that never should have been developed, and it's a shame that it exists.
Thank you. In terms of these companies that you've discussed, to what extent would you describe them as independent companies or actually government-owned or controlled in the sense of the level of requisitioning, tendering that's going on? Are they within China?
So these companies, many of them co-wrote the standards that we're talking about, the ones that request ethnicity detection. Hikvision and Dahua, for example, I'm certain that they were co-authors on at least 2 examples. And there are other Chinese companies that have been co-authors. So, I mean, that partially answered the question. Also, just by their own statements, they're not independent from the government. Hikvision says it's a state-owned company. They don't hide that. So I think that's a pretty clear-cut case. Their chairman, Chen Zhongnian, also holds the role of being the director of the 52nd Research Institute of the CETC simultaneously. Dahua, they're only about 13% government-owned. They claim to be independent, while at the same time holding study groups for their employees on party ideology, and making clear statements that you always follow the party, and, of course, working on all of these projects in Xinjiang, which implies a certain amount of dedication to the state's goals.
And in terms of the emotion detection systems that you've referred to, and I think you suggested or implied that they are underdeveloped or inaccurate, but do you foresee that they could be developed to a higher degree of accuracy? And following on from Professor Kumar's question, how might you envisage they might be used other than this example of monitoring people who are being tortured, for example?
So most people that analyze surveillance technology are doubtful that emotion recognition will ever be as accurate as sort of you and I talking right now, right? But even this interaction is a bit subjective, and that's part of the problem. It's hard for me to sort of pin down the specific emotion of any particular face with, greater than a certain amount of accuracy. And then to communicate that to computer and development processes adds a layer of complexity. That being said, I would caution people that the fact that they don't necessarily work to an extent actually makes this worse, because it's not whether or not they work that matters, it's whether or not they're being used. And the context of their use seems to be evaluating the emotional states of, and when I say emotional states, I'm also referring to tendencies, aggressiveness, violence, things that could factor into a decision about how someone's treated. And whether it's accurate or not is, well, if it's inaccurate, it's probably worse.
Thank you. Can I just ask a bit about government participation? Does the Chinese government fund research into ethnic recognition technology, or is it funded through the contracts that it gives out to companies of the kind you mentioned?
I honestly am not sure. I can tell you that they fund mass surveillance projects in Xinjiang, and that they purchase the technology, in other words, and elsewhere in China, so they're buying it. As for who's funding the research, I'm not sure. You could argue, Hikvision, for example, being a state-controlled company, they developed Uyghur face detection, and so at a minimum, the government has funded this indirectly through their state-owned companies.
And do you know which government entities are actually the contracting parties, so to speak, with the companies?
It varies very widely, but it's generally public security bureaus, or police entities.
National and provincial, regional.
It's typically provincial and local authorities. Yeah.
And is it part of the specification for the system, sorry, this is going to reveal my technological lack of education, that they link into the iJob system?
Not specifically. Well, it is part of the specifications that they link into the government's surveillance networks, and that they do so at all levels of government, national, provincial, and local. That's very common to see. They want these systems to be a sort of unified thing that many different public security levels can access. But the tenders don't specifically mention the Integrated Joint Operations Platform, so I can't actually definitively say if that's what they're referring to.
And last question quickly, which I win the prize for naivety. Is there any recourse under Chinese law regulation that the citizen has in relation to the use of stored information about them?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, discrimination is illegal in China on the basis of race, or officially speaking, I believe that the government actually does have a position on that. I could be wrong.
But no right of access to your information, the information that's stored?
Not as far as I know. Certainly in practice, there is no right of access.
Thank you.
Just a couple of questions if I've got time. How should we imagine this technology being used? Standard on film, massive screens and people sitting in front of them? Or is it much more sophisticated than that, and the machinery, the technology allows somebody sitting in a local police station to be alerted to a particular matter of interest to her or him? How does it work?
I think it would be both. Yeah, but I think it would be a bit of both. Again, this gets a bit into speculation because we haven't seen inside the centers or operation centers that would use these technologies. But I believe you would definitely see both.
But with this number of cameras, you'd need an army of people to be looking at a huge set of screens, wouldn't you? Or not?
Not necessarily. So I think a sort of mundane analogy, let's take traffic cameras. Traffic cameras up until recently would have required, if you wanted to sort of proactively and constantly monitor traffic flow or look for a particular car, you would need people watching those screens, manually analyzing them. And this, I think, demonstrates how the software these days is almost, I think, more important than the hardware in terms of defining what the system can really do and what it's for. Because if you then add in license plate recognition, which is widely available technology now, you have then transformed that system into something that tells you where everyone is going, the direction of travel, the amount of traffic, You can use it to track people down. Alerts can be sent to the police. You have all sorts of potential analytics on what's going on in the city. And all you've done is you've added a piece of software to something that was, dumb technology beforehand.
And you don't always need somebody sitting there looking at it. It alerts different systems automatically.
Well, the system would create an alert based on whatever parameters they've set. So, I mean, eventually it does go to someone, but, at that point you potentially filter through, sorry, I'm sort of too passionate in my gestures. You filter through a lot of different instances that would, in the past, have to be manually looked at by a person.
And then just to conclude, if I was there, I could buy a tiger chair from Chandy, and nobody would object.
Yeah, if you were a public security official, I assume so.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? No more. Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Connor, for coming to help us
Of
today,
course.
and for making yourself available from wherever you've actually come. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.